The soft glow of the evening sun filtered through the curtains of the modest suburban home, casting long shadows across the living room. David sat in his favorite armchair, his eyes fixed on the silent figure of his niece, Maya, curled up on the couch with a book she wasn't really reading. It had been 3 months since the tragic car accident that had taken Maya's parents, David's sister and brother-in-law, and brought the 11-year-old into his and his wife Sarah's care. David's heart ached as he watched Maya, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face, hiding her expression. She had always been a bright, talkative child, full of laughter and curiosity. But since the accident, it was as if a light had gone out inside her. The house, once filled with the joyous sounds of family gatherings, now seemed to echo with an oppressive silence. "Maya, sweetie," David said softly, leaning forward in his chair. "How about we play a game of chess? I remember you used to love beating me." Maya looked up, her brown eyes meeting David's for a brief moment before darting away. "No, thank you, Uncle David. I'm just going to read for a bit." David nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "All right, well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me." As Maya returned to her book, David exchanged a worried glance with Sarah, who was busy preparing dinner in the adjoining kitchen. They had both been trying their best to help Maya adjust, to make her feel at home and loved, but it seemed that with each passing day, she retreated further into herself. Later that evening, as David was saying goodnight to Maya, he noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Are you sleeping okay, Maya?" he asked gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. Maya shrugged, clutching her stuffed elephant, a gift from her parents on her last birthday, close to her chest. "I guess so," she mumbled, not meeting David's eyes. David reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind Maya's ear. "You know you can always come to us if you need anything, right? Even in the middle of the night. Aunt Sarah and I are here for you. Always." Maya nodded silently, and David's heart broke a little more at the pain he saw in her eyes. He leaned in, placing a soft kiss on her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." As David closed Maya's door and headed downstairs, he found Sarah waiting for him in the hallway, a concerned look on her face. "How is she?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David shook his head, running a hand through his graying hair. "Not good. Sarah, she's not sleeping well, I can tell. And she's still so closed off. I don't know how to reach her." Sarah wrapped her arms around her husband, offering what comfort she could. "We'll figure it out, David. We have to, for Maya's sake." As they stood there in the quiet hallway, neither of them aware of the silent tears falling on Maya's pillow upstairs, David made a silent vow. He would find a way to help his niece, to bring back the light to her eyes, no matter what it took. The next morning, as Sarah was helping Maya get ready for school, she noticed her niece seemed even more withdrawn than usual. "Maya, honey," Sarah said, brushing Maya's hair. "Is everything okay? You seem extra quiet this morning." Maya was silent for a long moment, and Sarah thought she wasn't going to respond. But then, in a voice so soft Sarah almost missed it, Maya spoke. "Uncle David comes into my room every night." Sarah's hand stilled, the brush hovering mid-stroke. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Maya shrugged, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't know. I feel him there sometimes, when I'm sleeping." Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of Maya's words. David hadn't mentioned going into Maya's room at night. Why would he? And why wouldn't he tell her about it? "Does Uncle David? Does he do anything when he's in your room?" Sarah asked carefully, trying to keep her voice neutral. Maya shook her head. "I don't think so. I'm usually asleep. I can feel him there." Sarah nodded slowly, forcing a smile onto her face. "Okay, sweetie. Thank you for telling me. Let's finish getting you ready for school, all right?" As Maya headed off to catch the school bus, Sarah stood in the doorway, watching her go. A knot of worry had formed in her stomach. She trusted David completely. He was the kindest, most gentle man she knew. But the idea of him going into Maya's room at night, without explanation, troubled her deeply. Sarah knew she needed to talk to David about this. But as she turned back into the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than met the eye. Little did she know, the truth would be far more heartbreaking and beautiful than she could have ever imagined. In the days following Maya's revelation, Sarah found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She watched Maya even more closely, searching for any signs of distress or fear around David. But, if anything, Maya seemed to be growing even more withdrawn, not just from her, but from David as well. One afternoon, as Sarah was folding laundry in the living room, she overheard David trying to engage Maya in conversation. "Hey, Maya," David said, his voice warm and encouraging. "I was thinking we could go to the park later, maybe feed the ducks. You used to love doing that with your mom." Sarah held her breath, hoping this might be the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. But Maya's response was barely audible. "No, thank you, Uncle David. I have homework." Sarah's heart sank as she heard David's sigh of disappointment. She peeked around the corner to see him watching Maya's retreating form, his face a mask of concern and helplessness. That night, as they got ready for bed, Sarah decided to broach the subject with David. "David," she began hesitantly, "have you noticed anything different about Maya lately?" David looked up from his book, his brow furrowed. "Different how? She's been struggling since she came to live with us, but that's to be expected, isn't it?" Sarah nodded, choosing her words carefully. "Yes, of course. It's just, she seems even more withdrawn lately, and she mentioned something the other day that I can't quite make sense of." David set his book aside, giving Sarah his full attention. "What did she say?" Sarah took a deep breath. "She said that you go into her room every night." The look of surprise on David's face was genuine. "What? I haven't been going into her room at night. Why would she think that?" Sarah shrugged, feeling a mix of relief at David's reaction and renewed concern about Maya's state of mind. "I don't know. She said she could feel your presence sometimes when she was sleeping." David ran a hand through his hair, a habit Sarah recognized as a sign of his distress. "Sarah, I swear to you, I haven't been going into her room. Do you think, could she be having nightmares? Maybe dreaming about her parents?" The possibility hadn't occurred to Sarah, but it made sense. That could be it. "Oh, David, what if she's been suffering alone all this time? We should have realized." David reached out, taking Sarah's hand in his. "We're doing our best, Sarah. Maya's been through something unimaginable. It's going to take time for her to heal." Sarah nodded, squeezing David's hand. "I know. I just wish there was more we could do to help her." As they settled into bed, Sarah's mind was still racing. She believed David. She knew in her heart he would never lie to her. But that left the question, what was really happening in Maya's room at night? Over the next few days, Sarah paid even closer attention to Maya's behavior. She noticed the dark circles under her niece's eyes growing more pronounced, the way Maya would sometimes startle at loud noises, the faraway look in her eyes during meals. One evening, as Sarah was tucking Maya into bed, she decided to try and get more information. "Maya, sweetie," she said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you, or if you're having trouble sleeping." Maya looked up at her aunt, her eyes wide and vulnerable. For a moment, Sarah thought she might open up. But then the walls came down again, and Maya simply nodded. "I know, Aunt Sarah. I'm fine. Just tired." Sarah's heart ached at the pain she could see hiding behind Maya's brave face. She leaned down, pressing a kiss to Maya's forehead. "All right, sweetheart. Sleep well. And remember, we're right down the hall if you need us." As Sarah closed Maya's door, she leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The feeling that she was missing something crucial, something that could help Maya, was overwhelming. That night, as she lay in bed listening to David's steady breathing beside her, Sarah made a decision. She needed to know what was really happening in Maya's room at night. It was time to do some investigating of her own. Little did Sarah know, her late-night vigil would reveal a truth far more poignant and heartbreaking than anything she could have imagined. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind filled with worry for Maya and determination to uncover the mystery, Sarah had no idea that the coming nights would change everything, not just for Maya, but for their entire family. The soft ticking of the bedside clock seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet of the night as Sarah lay awake, her eyes fixed on the glowing numbers, 11:45 p.m. She had been lying there for hours, waiting, listening for any sound that might indicate movement in the house. David's steady breathing beside her told her he was fast asleep, unaware of her vigil. Sarah felt a twinge of guilt for her suspicion, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't about not trusting David. It was about understanding what was happening with Maya. As the clock ticked over to midnight, Sarah heard it, the softest creak of floorboards in the hallway. Her heart began to race as she carefully slid out of bed, making sure not to disturb David. She crept to the bedroom door and eased it open, just in time to see a shadowy figure disappearing into Maya's room. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen, her mind reeling. It was true. Someone was going into Maya's room at night. But why? And was it really David, as Maya had said? Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Sarah tiptoed down the hallway. The door to Maya's room was slightly ajar, a sliver of soft light spilling out into the dark corridor. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached out to push the door open further. As she peered into the room, the scene that greeted her was so unexpected, so heart-wrenching, that for a moment Sarah thought she must be dreaming. David sat on the edge of Maya's bed, his back to the door. Maya was curled up on her side, her face scrunched in distress, soft whimpers escaping her lips. As Sarah watched, David gently took Maya's hand in his voice a soothing whisper in the quiet room. "Shh, Maya, it's okay. You're safe. I'm here." Maya's whimpers subsided, her face relaxing slightly at the sound of David's voice. David continued to speak, his words so soft Sarah had to strain to hear them. "Your mom and dad loved you so much, Maya. They're watching over you, I promise. And Aunt Sarah and I, we're here for you, always." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp as she realized what she was witnessing. This wasn't some sinister nighttime visit. This was David, comforting their niece through nightmares she had been too afraid or too ashamed to tell them about. As Sarah watched, David carefully tucked Maya's blanket around her, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to Sarah's eyes, David picked up the small framed photo of Maya's parents from the bedside table. He looked at it for a long moment before pressing a gentle kiss to the glass and setting it back in its place. "Good night, sis," David whispered to the photo. "I've got her. I promise." Unable to watch any longer without revealing her presence, Sarah quietly retreated to their bedroom. Her mind was whirling with what she had seen, her heart aching with a mixture of love for her husband and sorrow for the pain Maya had been silently enduring. As she slipped back into bed, Sarah's thoughts raced. How long had this been going on? How had they not realized the depth of Maya's nighttime struggles? And David, sweet, caring David, sneaking in night after night to comfort their niece without a word to anyone. Sarah lay awake, listening as David quietly returned to their room sometime later. She felt him slide into bed beside her, heard the soft sigh that escaped him, a sound that now held so much more meaning. In that moment, Sarah made a decision. Tomorrow, she would talk to David about what she had seen. They needed to address Maya's nightmares head-on, to let her know it was okay to need help, to grieve openly. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last thoughts were of the strength of family bonds, of the quiet ways love shows itself in times of pain. The mystery of the nighttime visits had been solved, but the journey of healing for their little family was far from over. Little did Sarah know, the conversation she would have with David the next day would open the floodgates of emotion for all of them, setting them on a path towards healing that would change their lives forever. The next morning, Sarah woke early, her mind still processing the events of the previous night. She lay in bed, watching David as he slept, marveling at the depths of compassion and love she had witnessed in him. As David began to stir, Sarah reached out, gently touching his cheek. "David," she said softly, "we need to talk." David's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his features as he registered the serious tone in Sarah's voice. "What is it? Is something wrong?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. "I saw you last night, David, in Maya's room." David's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something akin to guilt crossing his face. "Sarah, I can explain." Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You don't have to explain, David. I saw everything. I know what you've been doing." As the couple sat up in bed, Sarah recounted what she had witnessed the night before. David listened, his shoulders sagging with each word, as if a great weight was finally being lifted from them. When Sarah finished, David was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I didn't know how to tell you, Sarah. I didn't want you to worry more than you already were. The first night I heard her crying. I couldn't just lie there and do nothing." Sarah reached out, taking David's hand in hers. "Oh, David, why didn't you tell me? We could have been helping her together." David shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "Maya's been through so much, Sarah. I thought if I could just help her through the nights, maybe during the day she could start to heal. But it doesn't seem to be working. If anything, she's more withdrawn than ever." Sarah squeezed David's hand, her heart swelling with love for this man who had been carrying such a burden alone. "We need to talk to her, David. Let her know it's okay to need help, to grieve openly." David nodded, wiping at his eyes. "You're right. It's time we faced this as a family." As they got ready for the day, Sarah and David agreed to talk to Maya that evening. They would create a safe space for her to express her feelings, to share the pain she had been holding inside for so long. The day seemed to crawl by, each hour stretching endlessly as Sarah and David waited for the right moment to approach Maya. Finally, after dinner, as Maya was about to retreat to her room as usual, David gently called out to her. "Maya, sweetheart," David called out gently, "could you join us in the living room for a bit? Aunt Sarah and I would like to talk to you about something." Maya hesitated, her eyes darting between her aunt and uncle, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah quickly moved to reassure her. "No, honey, not at all. We just want to chat with you about something important." Reluctantly, Maya followed them into the living room, perching on the edge of the sofa, her posture tense and guarded. David and Sarah exchanged a glance before sitting down on either side of her, close, but not crowding her. David took a deep breath, his voice soft as he began. "Maya, your Aunt Sarah and I have noticed that you've been having a hard time lately, especially at night. We want you to know that it's okay to talk to us about it, about anything that's bothering you." Maya's eyes widened, her gaze dropping to her hands which were twisting nervously in her lap. I don't know what you mean," she mumbled, but her trembling voice betrayed her. Sarah gently placed her hand over Maya's fidgeting ones. "Sweetie, we know about the nightmares. Uncle David has been coming to your room at night to comfort you." At this, Maya's head snapped up, her eyes filling with tears. "You know?" she asked, her voice breaking. But I tried so hard to be quiet. I didn't want to bother you." David felt his heart breaking all over again. He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind Maya's ear. "Oh, Maya, you could never bother us. We're here for you, always. We want to help you through this." The dam finally broke. Maya's face crumpled, and she began to sob, deep, heart-wrenching cries that shook her small frame. Without hesitation, David and Sarah enveloped her in a tight embrace, creating a cocoon of love and safety around her. "I miss them so much," Maya wailed, her words muffled against David's shirt. "Every night, I see the accident. I hear the crash. And then they're gone again. Sarah stroked Maya's hair, her own tears falling freely. It's okay to miss them, sweetheart. It's okay to be sad and scared, but you don't have to go through this alone. For what felt like hours, they sat there, holding Maya as she cried out months of pent-up grief and fear. David and Sarah murmured words of comfort, assuring her of their love, of her parents' love, of the fact that it was okay to feel whatever she was feeling. As Maya's sobs gradually subsided into hiccups, David gently pulled back, cupping her tear-stained face in his hands. Maya, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your mom was my sister, and I loved her very much. When we lost her and your dad, it hurt me too. But you know what? You're a part of them. Every time I look at you, I see your mom's kindness and your dad's courage. They live on in you, and that's a beautiful thing. Maya sniffled, looking up at David with red-rimmed eyes. Really? She asked, her voice small but hopeful. Sarah nodded, wiping away her own tears. Really, sweetheart, and we're so grateful to have you in our lives. We want to help you remember your parents and honor their memory, while also helping you move forward and be happy. Do you think you could let us do that? Maya was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then, slowly, she nodded. I think I'd like that, she whispered. David smiled, pressing a kiss to Maya's forehead. That's my brave girl. Now, how about we start by talking about those nightmares? Maybe if we face them together, they won't be so scary anymore. As Maya began to hesitantly open up about her nightmares, David and Sarah listened attentively, offering comfort and reassurance. It was a painful conversation, filled with tears and difficult memories, but it was also the beginning of something beautiful, a family coming together to heal, to support each other through the darkest of times. As the evening wore on, Maya's initial hesitance gave way to a flood of emotions and memories. She spoke of her nightmares in detail for the first time, describing the terrifying replays of the accident that haunted her sleep. David and Sarah listened, their hearts breaking anew with each painful revelation, but they remained steady, offering unwavering support and love. I keep seeing the car, Maya whispered, her voice trembling. It's spinning, and I can hear Mom screaming. And then, silence. Just awful silence. David pulled Maya closer, his voice thick with emotion. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you've been carrying this all alone, but you're not alone anymore. We're here, and we're not going anywhere. Sarah nodded, squeezing Maya's hand. That's right, honey. And it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to remember your parents, to miss them, to be angry, or sad, or scared. All of those feelings are normal and valid. As Maya continued to share, David found himself opening up as well. He told Maya about his own grief, about the sleepless nights he'd spent thinking about his sister, about the guilt he felt for not being able to protect her. When I first heard you crying at night, David explained softly, it broke my heart. I knew exactly what you were going through because I was going through it too. I couldn't bear the thought of you suffering alone. Maya looked up at her uncle, her eyes wide with understanding. Is that why you've been coming to my room? To help me not be alone? David nodded, a sad smile on his face. That's right. I thought if I could just be there, even if you didn't know it, maybe it would help. Maybe you'd feel your mom and dad's love through me somehow. Fresh tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. But this time, there was a glimmer of something else in her eyes, gratitude, and perhaps a spark of healing. It did help, she admitted. Even though I was scared and sad, feeling you there, it made me feel safe. Sarah wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders. And you are safe, sweetheart. We may not be able to replace your parents, but we love you just as much as they did. We're your family, and we're here for you, always. As the conversation continued, David and Sarah shared their own memories of Maya's parents. Funny stories, touching moments, the little things that made them special. Maya listened intently, sometimes laughing through her tears, sometimes asking questions, eager to know more about the parents she had lost too soon. "Your mom had the most infectious laugh," David reminisced, a fond smile on his face. "She could light up a whole room with it. And your dad, he was the best storyteller I've ever known. He could make even the most boring tale sound like an epic adventure." Maya's eyes lit up at these details. "I remember Mom's laugh," she said softly. "And Dad's stories at bedtime. I was afraid I might forget them." Sarah hugged Maya tightly. "We'll help you remember, sweetheart. We'll tell you stories, show you pictures, keep their memory alive. They'll always be a part of you. And a part of us too." As the night grew late, Maya's eyelids began to droop, the emotional toll of the evening catching up with her. David scooped her up in his arms, just as he had done when she was younger, and carried her to her room. As he tucked her into bed, Maya reached out, catching his hand. "Uncle David," she said sleepily, Will you stay with me tonight? Just until I fall asleep." David felt his heart swell with love and a bittersweet joy. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be right here." Sarah appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on her face as she watched David settle into the chair beside Maya's bed. She brought in an extra blanket, draping it over David's shoulders before leaning down to kiss Maya goodnight. As Maya drifted off to sleep, her hand still clasped in David's, Sarah stood in the doorway, watching over her family. The road ahead would not be easy, she knew. There would be more tears, more difficult conversations, more moments of grief and pain. But there would also be healing, love, and the strength that comes from facing hardships together. In that moment, as the soft sounds of Maya's peaceful breathing filled the room, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. They were a family, bound not just by blood, but by love, by shared pain, and by the commitment to help each other through the darkest of times. As she quietly closed the door, leaving David to his vigil, Sarah sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the love that had brought them through this difficult night, and for the hope that now shone, however faintly, on the horizon of their future together. The days following their emotional night of revelations brought subtle but significant changes to the household. The heavy silence that had once permeated the air began to lift, replaced by a gentle hum of shared grief and budding hope. Maya, though still struggling, seemed to breathe a little easier. The dark circles under her eyes slowly began to fade as her nightmares, while not gone completely, became less frequent and less intense. Each morning, she would come down to breakfast and share with David and Sarah whether she had a good night or a difficult one. This simple act of openness, once unthinkable, now became a cornerstone of their daily routine. Sarah, determined to create an environment where Maya felt safe to express her emotions, started a new tradition. Each evening after dinner, they would sit together in the living room for what she called memory time. During these moments, they would look through old photo albums, share stories about Maya's parents, or simply talk about their feelings. One evening, as they flipped through an album filled with pictures from Maya's early childhood, the young girl's finger landed on a photo of her mother holding her as a baby. "I miss her smell," Maya said softly, her voice tinged with sadness, but no longer breaking. "Mom always smelled like vanilla, and something else I could never name." David smiled, his eyes misting over. "Lavender," he said. "Your mom loved lavender. She used to have these little sachets of it in all her drawers." Maya's eyes lit up at this new piece of information about her mother. "Really? I didn't know that." Sarah, seeing an opportunity, suggested gently, "Maybe we could get some lavender sachets for your room, Maya, as a way to keep a part of your mom close." Maya nodded enthusiastically, and the next day, they made a special trip to a local boutique to pick out lavender sachets. As Maya placed them in her drawers that evening, there were tears in her eyes, but also a small smile on her face. David, inspired by the success of Memory Time, decided to take things a step further. He reached out to family, friends, and relatives, asking them to write down their favorite memories of Maya's parents. These stories and anecdotes were collected into a beautiful scrapbook, which he presented to Maya on a quiet Sunday afternoon. "This is for you, sweetheart," David said, handing Maya the book. "So you'll always have a piece of your mom and dad with you, and so you can learn about parts of them you might not remember or might never have known." Maya's hands trembled as she opened the book, her eyes wide as she took in the handwritten notes, the photos, the little mementos pasted onto the pages. She looked up at David and Sarah, her lower lip quivering. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the book to her chest. This means everything." As Maya began to heal, so too did David and Sarah. The weight of unspoken worries and secret nighttime vigils lifted, allowing them to grieve more openly alongside Maya. They shared their own struggles, their own moments of missing Maya's parents, creating a shared space of healing that strengthened their bonds as a family. One particularly significant moment came when Maya, after weeks of hesitation, finally felt ready to visit her parents' grave. The day was crisp and clear as they made their way through the cemetery, Maya walking between David and Sarah, holding their hands tightly. As they approached the gravestone, Maya's steps faltered. David knelt down beside her, his voice gentle. "It's okay to be scared, Maya. We're right here with you." Maya nodded, taking a deep breath before stepping forward. She traced the letters of her parents, names on the cool stone, tears falling silently down her cheeks. But these were different tears than before, not the desperate, lonely tears of hidden grief, but tears of remembrance and love shared openly with her family. After a few moments, Maya turned to David and Sarah. Can I have a moment alone with them?" she asked hesitantly. Sarah nodded, squeezing Maya's hand. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll be right over there when you're ready." As David and Sarah stepped away, they watched Maya kneel by the grave, her lips moving in quiet conversation with her parents. In that moment, they saw not just the pain of loss, but the strength of a young girl beginning to find her way through grief. When Maya rejoined them, her eyes were red but clear, a small smile on her face. "I told them about you," she said, "about how you've been taking care of me. I think they'd be happy." David pulled Maya into a tight hug, his own eyes brimming with tears. "I know they would be, sweetheart. They'd be so proud of how brave you've been." As they left the cemetery that day, there was a palpable sense of a corner turned, of a new chapter beginning. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but they would face them together, as a family bound by love, memory, and the shared journey of healing. As weeks turned into months, the changes in their little family became more pronounced. Maya's smiles, once rare and fleeting, now came more easily and lingered longer. Her nightmares, while not completely gone, had decreased significantly. On the nights when they did come, Maya no longer suffered in silence. Instead, she would pad down the hallway to David and Sarah's room, knowing she would find comfort and understanding there. One such night, as David held Maya close, soothing her after a particularly vivid dream, he found himself sharing a story he had almost forgotten. "You know, Maya," he said softly, "your mom used to have nightmares too, when we were kids." Maya looked up, surprise and curiosity shining in her tear-stained eyes. "She did?" David nodded, a fond smile playing on his lips. "Oh yes, she was afraid of the dark, just like you. And do you know what helped her?" Maya shook her head, hanging on every word. "We made up stories together," David continued. "Happy stories, funny stories, stories where she was the hero who conquered the darkness. It became our special thing, something just between us." Sarah, who had been listening from her side of the bed, chimed in gently. "Maybe that could be something special for you and Uncle David too, Maya, creating stories to chase away the bad dreams." Maya's face lit up at the idea, and from that night on, a new tradition was born. Whenever Maya had a nightmare, she and David would weave fantastical tales together, turning her fears into adventures, her pain into triumph. These storytelling sessions became a source of joy and bonding, a way for Maya to connect with her mother's memory while forging a deeper relationship with her uncle. As Maya's healing progressed, she began to open up more at school as well. Her teachers noticed the change, commenting on her increased participation in class and her willingness to interact with her peers. One day, Maya came home bursting with excitement. "Aunt Sarah! Uncle David!" she called out as she burst through the door. "I got picked to be in the school play." David and Sarah exchanged glances of joy and pride. This was the Maya they had been hoping to see, engaged, excited, embracing life again. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah exclaimed, pulling Maya into a hug. "What's the play about?" As Maya launched into an animated description of the play, a fantasy adventure about a young girl's journey through a magical world, David felt a lump form in his throat. He could see so much of his sister in Maya at that moment. The same enthusiasm, the same expressive hands as she talked. Later that evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Maya suddenly grew quiet. Do you think Mom and Dad would be happy about me being in the play?" she asked hesitantly. David reached across the table, taking Maya's hand in his. "Oh, Maya, they would be over the moon. Your mom loved the theater. Did you know that? She was in every school play when we were growing up." Maya's eyes widened. "Really? I didn't know that?" Sarah nodded, adding, "And your dad, he could build the most amazing sets. I bet he would have volunteered to help with the scenery for your play in a heartbeat." As they continued to share memories of Maya's parents' love for the arts, an idea began to form in David's mind. The next day, while Maya was at school, he made a few phone calls. When Maya returned home, he had a surprise waiting for her. "Maya," he said, barely containing his excitement, "how would you like to wear something special for your play?" Maya looked at him curiously as he presented her with a small, ornate box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small star pendant. "This was your mother's," David explained softly. "She wore it in her first school play. I thought you might like to wear it in yours, to have a piece of her with you on stage." Maya's eyes filled with tears. But these were tears of joy, of connection. She threw her arms around David, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, Uncle David. Thank you so much." As the day of the play approached, the house buzzed with activity. Sarah helped Maya learn her lines. David regaled her with stories of her mother's stage adventures, and together they created a costume that incorporated elements of both her parents' styles. On the night of the performance, as Maya stood backstage, nervous energy radiating off her, she clutched the star pendant around her neck. David knelt down beside her, gently adjusting her costume. "You're going to be amazing, Maya," he said softly. "And you know what? Your mom and dad are watching. They're always with you, in here." He placed his hand over her heart. Maya nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know," she said, her voice steady and sure. "And so are you and Aunt Sarah. My family." As Maya stepped out onto the stage, her face glowing under the lights, David and Sarah sat in the audience, their hearts swelling with pride and love. In that moment, they knew that while the path of grief was long and winding, they had found their way to a new kind of happiness, a new definition of family. The little girl on stage wasn't just Maya. She was a symbol of resilience, of the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. She was the bridge between past and present, carrying forward the legacy of her parents while carving out her own place in the world. As they watched Maya deliver her lines with confidence and joy, David and Sarah knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of sadness and remembrance. But they also knew that they would face whatever came their way together, bound by a love that had been forged in the fires of loss and tempered by the strength of healing. In Maya's smile, in her laughter, in her growing confidence, they saw the promise of a future bright with possibility. And in their hearts, they carried the knowledge that family is not just about blood, but about the bonds we choose to nurture, the love we choose to give, and the memories we choose to honor. As the curtain fell and the audience erupted in applause, David and Sarah stood, tears of joy streaming down their faces. Their little family had weathered the storm, and emerged stronger, closer, and more loving than ever before. The unexplained visits that had once caused so much concern had become the catalyst for a journey of healing, understanding, and unbreakable familial bonds. In that moment of triumph, as Maya took her bow on stage, her star pendant gleaming under the lights, they knew that while the past would always be a part of them, their future together was filled with hope, love, and the unshakable strength of a family united by both joy and sorrow.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.